Welcome back to another edition of History in Your Own Backyard. I'm Satoli. Today I'm in Henry County, Indiana, where I came across this old Phantom Bridge. Cool story. Stay tuned and we'll check it out. Before we talk about this old bridge, let's talk about abandoned railroad lines and the bridges and tunnels that they once used. Railroad infrastructure in the United States peaked around 1916 with over 254,000 miles of track across the country. As of 2023, that number has dropped to about 140,000 miles of track. By contrast, the interurbans also peaked around 1916 with about 15,580 miles of track, mostly located in the Midwest, with the epicenter in Ohio. However, by the end of World War II, almost all of the interurban lines were out of business, mainly due to competition from the automobile. Even though many of these rail companies are long gone, you can still find the remnants virtually everywhere if you know where to look. The railroad or interurban line that has been vacated but is still visible is known as a ghost railroad and can be spotted on the ground typically as an embankment as well as from above from their telltale arrow straight right-of-way. With the railroad's straight line mentality, this meant that bridges and culverts had to be built whenever a creek, river, or valley had to be crossed, or a tunnel constructed when a hill or a mountain was in the way. These abandoned bridges and tunnels are known as phantom bridges and phantom tunnels. If you live in the Midwest, chances are that there's probably one of these abandoned structures within 5 or 10 miles of your home. Now that we know about abandoned railroad infrastructure, let's check out our finds on this trip. A little bit of background about the interurban line before we talk about the bridge. In 1908, Indianapolis was a hub for interurbans with 7 lines already entering the city. However, a new line was being discussed to connect Indianapolis with Newcastle, Indiana, and eventually Toledo, Ohio. The line was to be built parallel to the Cleveland, Cincinnati, Chicago, and St. Louis railroad tracks and became known as the Honeybee line, although I have no idea where that name came from. On January 26, 1910, the first train ran on the Honeybee line, leaving Newcastle at 10 a.m. and heading west. The train only went as far as Shirley, Indiana, about halfway to Indianapolis, before it ran out of tracks. The remaining tracks to Indianapolis were eventually completed, but like most interurban lines, this one had financial troubles throughout the years. Unable to compete against the automobile, the line closed in 1937. So, this 3-span concrete arch bridge built in 1909 is about 150 feet long and spans Duck Creek just north of the ghost town of Mount Lawn, Indiana. To see the video about the ghost town of Mount Lawn, click on the link at the end of this video. There was no actual train depot at Mount Lawn for the interurban. It was known as a flag stop, where people would flag down the approaching train for a ride to the next town. This bridge is definitely falling apart. Yet, Gene Ingram, president of the Henry County Historical Society, told me that the failing concrete in the center span was like that when he was a kid back in the 1950s. The concrete bridge abutments just 100 feet to the north of this bridge are all that remains of the Cleveland, Cincinnati, Chicago, and St. Louis Railroad line in this area, which after several mergers also went out of business.